Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. The ceasefire officially ended. Phase 1 is ending now, and Israel and Hamas are having certain declarations that are giving us indications to where things are going in the future. From an Israeli perspective, they officially had declarations that the ceasefire ended and we have preparations to go back to a full-scale war with Gaza. But how realistic is this, and how does that sit with the other statements that are coming from Israel? So there was a report that came out later in the evening from the Israeli media about the Israeli leadership speaking with Steve Witkoff, the man who was in charge of orchestrating the entry into phase 2. Reportedly, he had pressed on Benjamin Netanyahu to go into phase 2 of the ceasefire, and Netanyahu later on agreed. Benjamin Netanyahu tried to have multiple delays, more pressure coming from Witkoff and the US administration, and they continued down the ceasefire. Now, what people need to understand when it comes to Israel breaking the ceasefire and going to an all-out war, or Israel continuing with the ceasefire and not escalating, is the concept of the ceasefire agreement. The Palestinian resistance led by Hamas, they already refused many proposals before entering this ceasefire if that ceasefire only was exclusive to phase 1, if it didn't have continued ceasefire, if there was no prospect of ending the war completely. However, this ceasefire hasn't been made public, and Benjamin Netanyahu deliberately does not publish the details of this ceasefire. However, what we do know and what we do understand is that this ceasefire agreement is based on Joe Biden's ceasefire plan, which included, in the words of Joe Biden himself, that if both parties do not agree on phase 2, then they would continue to have a ceasefire in phase 1 up until an agreement is reached on phase 2. Now, officially, from an official perspective, phase 1 ended. Hamas are saying we are not currently negotiating. Why are they saying that? They're saying that because Israel is having new demands that they're trying to impose in phase 2, which include primarily disarming Hamas. Hamas getting rid of their weapons and them having no role in controlling Gaza the day after. Now, with the first part, disarming, there's a big problem. With the second part, less so. Why? Because Hamas has a formula of remaining in Gaza and having any other Palestinian national body or people or technocratic government that is interested in the Palestinian people and serving them, their national rights and their sovereignty. They don't have a problem with that. They're not there to rule their resistance movement. However, with the second one, that's something that's not negotiable. There are reports that Egyptian mediators told Hamas this is what they're asking. Do you want to hand your weapons to us, to Egypt, with observation also from European bodies? Hamas immediately told them, no, thank you very much. As a matter of fact, they had multiple statements before saying that the case of the resistance arms and weapons, they're non-negotiable. We are oppressed people resisting, the people who should be disarmed. I mean, the argument should really be the people who should be disarmed and dismantled are the occupiers, who have been brutally using this force against the innocent Palestinian people for over 75 years. However, Hamas are saying non-negotiable. Israel knows that these things are red lines for Hamas. So what are they trying exactly? They're trying their luck with the US administration and seeing if they can somehow apply pressure on Hamas. However, what they're trying to do more is have this image of victory. This image of victory that is nowhere to be seen. Israel has been humiliated and defeated in Gaza. Israel is unable to achieve any of its military objectives in Gaza. And as a matter of fact, they haven't achieved anything apart from getting prisoners of war back only when they entered into negotiations with the Palestinian resistance. That's the first thing. Secondly, is Israel prepared militarily to go on an all-out campaign in Gaza? The reports that are coming from Israel are saying that there are plans in Israel to go into an all-out offensive in Gaza that will start with aerial raids, followed by tank shells on Gaza, and then following that, maybe entry of some troops into Gaza. However, that's not very realistic whatsoever. The Israeli army is exhausted. It has been humiliated in Gaza. Tens of thousands of casualties, including killed and wounded. Hundreds of thousands suffering from PTSD. Lack of willingness to fight. No conscription success with the Orthodox community. And they only have 2 divisions on the borders with Gaza. There's a division in the northern part and the division in the southern part. Currently, some of them near the perimeter area, but most of them are outside the borders with Gaza. Israel has more divisions on the borders with Lebanon than they do in Gaza. Israel has more experienced units in Syria than they do in Gaza. Therefore, that means that Israel is not really interested in going into Gaza, let alone, of course, the over 50% refusal to comply with conscription orders in Israel, the criticism, the report that came from the IDF inquiry into the failures of October the 7th. All of these problems, they indicate that Israel isn't interested in actually waging an all-out war again in Gaza, and they also prove that this ceasefire agreement is solid. Because Hamas, they were confident enough to tell Israel and the whole world that no, we have enough cards to force Israel to go into phase 2. And today, Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, they released another video of Israeli prisoners of war who were IDF soldiers in Gaza, saying that, enough is enough, take us back home, we need to be released. And the Palestinian resistance is playing the psychological game very well with Israel. They know what hurts them very much, and they know what affects the Israeli population. And these things are working at the end of the day. These people are saying things that are true. Whether some things are orchestrated or not, the essence of what they're saying is true. Benjamin Netanyahu failed to get them out. More people are dying, and they want to go out. It's very basic stuff. So that pressure combined with the agreement that is clearly forcing Israel to continue, alongside the lack of enough divisions around Gaza, because Israel at the peak of this genocide, they had 5 divisions inside of Gaza, 2 divisions. What are you going to do? And all 5 of them went back with their tails between their legs. What are you going to do? Another thing came, another clarification. These talks that happened in Israel in this evening with the Witkoff administration, saying that we want to give it time. All of a sudden, Israel is interested in giving it time. All of this is PR work. People need to understand that. We want to give it time because, the United States is having these efforts, and they asked us, to give a few days. Maybe they can apply a bit of pressure on Hamas. Maybe they can agree. Hamas told you, I'm not in the negotiations. What do you mean? Try with who exactly? Hamas said, I am not in the negotiations. Who are you exactly trying with? This is why we're saying this is a PR attempt coming from Israel. But during these reports in Israel, they said, they started talking more clearly about the prospect of ending the war. They gradually put things inside the Israeli media. They slowly and gradually push things to the public that include ending the war, the prospect of completely ending the war. Why do they do that? Well, primarily from Benjamin Netanyahu's interests with his cabinet and with his allies, primarily Smotrich. He doesn't want his coalition to collapse, and he doesn't want to rely on a very fragile opposition safety net in Israel, and he doesn't want any early elections. So he has to publish certain things that would show that, oh no, we have a prospect of going back to the ceasefire. However, going back to the war, However, we want to give some time for the U.S. administration because, we appreciate the U.S. administration and they're trying really hard, and maybe we can reach an agreement. But in the meantime, though, we have what's necessary to go and attack Gaza. Now, how long will this understanding or this temporary kind of extension of the ceasefire continue, and can Israel break it? The reports are saying that it could take up until the end of the month of Ramadan, including Eid al-Fitr, which is after Ramadan. So at least 1 month. However, this 1 month is too long for the Israeli families of the prisoners of war who are still in Gaza. These people are not going to be satisfied with 1 month of no progress. They're going to be telling the Israeli government, and they're going to be protesting in massive numbers to continue down with the ceasefire, like the video of the prisoners of war in Gaza that Al-Qassam released, saying that we don't have time. It's time for us to go back home. So there is an understanding with the administration. It is not very likely that Israel will go back to a full-scale war. If they would break the ceasefire in a blatant manner, it would be a case of potentially airstrikes that again would be very ineffective and would hinder the prospect of releasing the rest of the Israeli prisoners of war. The Palestinian resistance already told them, talks are the only way to get them back alive. Otherwise, you will get them back in coffins. And the Israeli population are listening. Another important indication that this time we might not necessarily see Israel going back to a full-scale war after this initial phase of the ceasefire is if we compare it with the temporary ceasefire that took place during the beginning of the genocide. That time we need to compare it with now. What's the difference between the two cases? Well, in that time, the Israeli defense minister, the wanted war criminal at the time, Yoav Gallant, he signed an order to break the ceasefire and restart the war. Now, we don't have anything as such. No one in Israel said that we need to break the ceasefire and we need to go back on an all-out war again. There is nothing of the sort. There's only a ceasefire agreement that clearly has clauses to continue with the ceasefire if no agreement has been reached on phase 2. And all we have is threats from Israel that we are going to escalate and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And Benjamin Netanyahu, he chooses things very deliberately. For example, an escalation with Syria at this sensitive timing to cover up the fact that they're going to continue down with the ceasefire. However, on the ground in Gaza, clearly, for now, things are continuing. A big question, can Israel break the ceasefire? Israel technically can break the ceasefire at any time. However, the breaking of the ceasefire and Israel restarting a war requires all of the things that we mentioned that Israel isn't prepared for and doesn't have. Israel isn't prepared with manpower to go on an all-out campaign in Gaza. What Israel is prepared for is to carry out some airstrikes in Gaza. If they carry out some airstrikes in Gaza, they probably have some clauses in the ceasefire agreement that haven't been made public again. That would include Hamas, for example, not releasing the prisoners of war up until a certain date, for example, or risking the deal altogether. It could have many things, many meanings. And the fact that the Palestinian resistance inside of Gaza, the armed resistance inside of Gaza, including field and military commanders, are walking freely and publicly and having these burial ceremonies and funerals in Gaza, going in public in days where they're not releasing Israeli prisoners of war, that indicates that there is a solid agreement. Because Israel, well, you're saying that your campaign here was to eliminate Hamas, and you're seeing these people roaming around freely everywhere, and you're not targeting them. What does that mean? That means that there's a solid agreement, and that Israel indeed submitted to the demands of the Palestinian resistance. So the next few days will come with more proposals. More importantly, in relation to the image and the essence of the phase 2 part of the ceasefire. How will it look like? When will it start to get implemented? How many Israeli prisoners of war will be released in exchange for how many Palestinian prisoners? Hamas are saying no one will be released in any period of an extended ceasefire between phases 1 and 2. So we're not expecting any more prisoner swaps so long as the situation is as it is now, meaning an extension of the ceasefire, not phase 2. Phase 2 will be the only time after this time we're in now, after this phase or extension period of ceasefire, where we will see anyone being released. Hamas is not negotiating. They declared Israeli prisoners of war will only be released once we are in phase 2. And the thing that Israel is trying to dodge as much as possible in phase 2 is the fact that phase 2 includes a blatant declaration of an Israeli complete withdrawal from Gaza and a clear declaration that the war has ended. Israel so far refuses to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. They're causing more problems with Egypt. They're causing more problems with other countries as well, but primarily Egypt and the Palestinian side. And Israel still refuses to say that the war has ended completely. Will the United States come up with this magic formula that Israel will agree upon, or will Israel have to retreat again, do another U-turn, continue with phase 2 as it is, and what they're doing now is nothing but PR stunts to show some sort of authority or some sort of an image of victory that they failed to achieve on the ground?